Hello, everybody. I am Marcus Sungiala, and I'm going to talk about integrating the overt engine to an external authentication mechanism. Specifically, I'm going to talk about this integration using an Active Directory domain. I am Senior Principal Technical Product Manager at Oracle Linux and Virtualization, and I'm working with Oracle since 2018. But this talk is not about me; it's about the overt engine, the overt itself. So we're going to talk about the prerequisites to running this integration and to successfully running this integration, how to configure the external authentication mechanism, troubleshooting an LDAP connection to an Active Directory server, and at the end, removing that external authentication mechanism if you need to rerun the configuration or if it is not needed anymore. We start with prerequisites, the Windows user account. Microsoft Windows Active Directory does not allow anonymous LDAP user lookups from the system. So if you just open a terminal in your ovirt-engine server and try to run an LDAP search directly to the Active Directory server, it will inform you, it will give you a clearly message: in order to perform this operation, a successful bind must be completed on the connection. In other terms, you need to authenticate. As I'm using a lab, I'm just running the ldapsearch test authenticating with the administrator account. I do not need to say that this operation for test lab is not a problem. For a production level environment, it's not suitable to use the administrator account for this kind of operation. In this exactly example, we have two problems. The first problem is that it's a clear text connection. So everything that passes on the network will pass in clear text. Users, binders, passwords, so it's not a recommendation. And also, the administrator has many features that we do not need for this kind of operation. We just need to be able to see if a user exists on the remote server. So to create a user account, it can be a service account, it can be a domain user account, no matter which one we are going to use. In this example, I'm creating an account called Oracle Service OLVM or Oracle SVC OLVM into the Managed Service Accounts container. It's a service account, and I can use this account to do all the LDAP lookups into the Active Directory server. To connect the Active Directory server, you will need the distinguished name, the user distinguished name, or the user principal name. If you do not know the distinguished name you need to use, you can run the ds-query command on the Active Directory server, and it will retrieve to you that information. In this example, I'm using another account I previously created called olvm-int, and I received that distinguished name. For the LDAP command, when passing the -D, I can inform BSDN for the connection. It's going to work perfectly. But sometimes you may run that ds-query command to see, to identify the user DN, and you just receive an empty answer. Some users, I'm not sure why, the Active Directory does not show a distinguished name for it. But you say, so do I can use that account for the connection, for the lookups? Yes. Instead of using the distinguished name, you can use the UPN. The UPN is just the user login at domain. An example, I'm running an LDAP search authenticating with the Oracle SVC OLVM at example.com. I will need to pass to inform the password, and it will run the bind, will connect successfully, and retrieve all the information I'm looking for. It's a normal operation, no matter which way you are identifying your user. You're authenticating using the distinguished name or the user principal name. It's going to work fine. Second thing we need for the authentication, we need DNS records. We need service DNS records. For plain text connection, use the LDAP protocol. We are going to need a special register called underscore LDAP dot underscore TCP dot domain. This DNS record is automatically created when you when you create a new Active Directory domain. You can just open terminal at your ovirt-engine server, run the nslookup command, the dig command, or the host command as in this example. This is the expected behavior. Just connect to the server, query for the service record of the LDAP protocol, and brings to you the expected server you should connect to have all the answers, all the lookup you need. But instead of this, if you receive an error, no such domain, NX domain answer, in general, it means you're using the wrong name server for host name resolution. When you need to authenticate to LDAP server, you need to check the Active Directory server for those records. An easy way to test this connection using nslookup, dig, or the host command, just point to the Active Directory domain server to see if it correctly answers for your query. In my example, I'm just pointing the host command to the Active Directory server. If it runs okay, no problem. I received the correctly answer for the SRV record. Perhaps I may need to change my /c/resolve.conf file to point my name server to Active Directory domain. Or if I have network topology where I cannot connect directly to it and using a stub resolver name server, perhaps that name server need a forward zone to the Active Directory to correctly perform DNS queries regarding that domain. Besides the underscore LDAP underscore TCP dot domain record, if you intend to use encrypted connections like LDAPS, you are going to need non-standard DNS records. Why non-standard DNS records? There's no predefined DNS record for the LDAPS service. If I try to run the same query, host-t srv underline LDAPS underline TCP underline example.com, I'm going to receive a no such domain, an error that this record is not available. What do I need to do? I need to add it manually to my domain, to my DNS server. If you're using Active Directory, you need to open the DNS Manager application at your Active Directory domain server, expand your domain, and clicking on the underlying TCP container. At this example, we see there's no underlying LDAPS entry. So I need to add an SRV connection for this, a service location record for this protocol. What I need to inform? I need to inform the service specifically. I need to set the priority, the weight, and the port to connect. And last, the host name, where it's going to connect to. You can customize priority and weight. You can choose anything you want, but the normal is to use priority 0 and weight 100. Using those values, you're going to create a standard service record, in this case pointing to the LDAPS protocol. Just add it, you can then open a terminal and run a DNS query, confirming now you have that record available. Since I have the correctly service DNS record available, I need to check if I have the LDAPS available at the domain servers. The Active Directory, when we just provision an Active Directory domain server, a new domain using Active Directory, and I open a terminal, open the command prompt, and run a netstart to see which ports are available are in listening state, I can see 636 as in listening state. Even having these ports available in listening state, if I try to connect to this port, it's not going to answer. It's available, it's there, but it's not feasible for you to connect. You can't using LDAPS, you can't connect to the server. And if you say, okay, I'm going to try StartTLS. The difference between LDAPS and StartTLS is just LDAPS connects to the 636 port, TCP port, while StartTLS starts cryptography encryption on the standard port. It connects to 389 LDAP ports for encryption. I can test the availability also using the OpenSSL command. For StartTLS, as I said, I have two differences. First, the ldapsearch command. In this case, ldapsearch command, I need to add slash upper ZZ connection, and I need to point to the LDAP URL of the server. I do not use the LDAPS connection. LDAPS is an encrypted connection itself, and ZZ for traditional encryption, we start with StartTLS on this connection. So it's not going to work if you try to run /ZZ indicating LDAPS URI for the connection. In both scenarios, I cannot connect to the server. In the first example, it was not able to connect to the server. In this example, I got an error initializing the SSL-TLS connection. In both cases, I just can confirm it's not available. And also, with the LDAPS connection, I can check it with the OpenSSL command. In both cases, it will try to connect, retrieve the certificate information, it's running, and you will see what's going on with that connection. Okay. Configuring the Active Directory domain server to support encryption to activate LDAPS and StartTLS is out of scope of this presentation. I assume you was able to manage it, to handle it, and start that connection, that service correctly on the Active Directory. Now you have LDAPS and StartTLS active in your Active Directory server. What now? What are the next steps? Well, the next step is just confirm you can connect to it using that certification, that certificates you published on the Active Directory. If you're using local certificate authority or a certificate authority that's not available at your Linux machine, you will need the certificate authority public key and import it. Basic steps. All the certificate authorities and public keys are stored in a CA trust environment in your Linux machine. You can access this directory /pki CA trust source enters, download the CA public key to your system, and update CA trust using the extract option. Using this, you're going to import that certificate authority public key into your Linux machine, and your system will use it while. I do not need to inform the ldapsearch command to use that public key. When connecting to the server, automatically ldapsearch will try to look locally for the CA public key to validate that connection. In this first example, I'm using the LDAPS connection, and we can see we retrieve the information. I am looking for the Oracle SBC OLDM user account and just asking for its distinguished name, and it brings it correctly for me in my example. So perfectly, it's working fine. In the second example, instead of LDAPS, I'm running a StartTLS connection, and it successfully connects to the system and brings me the same information I was retrieving in the first example. Okay, now I'm able to connect to Active Directory using an encrypted connection, and I can do LDAP lookups for whatever I need on that server perfectly. Now it's time to set up my external authentication mechanism. I am pretty sure almost all of you have run this command before. We are going to use the authentication authorization extension of the ovirt-engine. We are going to use the ldap-setup command for that. And I just pick up some snippets of code of output to make it easier to understand. I installed the package ovirt-engine/aaa/ldap/setup. I'm running the same commands for the connection, and we receive a list of available LDAP implementations that are compatible with ovirt-engine. I'm using the Active Directory connection, so it's going to use a specific set of configurations and informations for that LDAP connection, and I need to inform the first name for this, selecting the profile for Active Directory and passing the first name, in my case, example.com. The next step, we need to inform how to connect, which protocol you're going to use for the connection. It can be LDAPS, it can be StartTLS. StartTLS is the preferable connection type. It uses a standard port, does not need special implementation on the client side, neither on the server side. And it enables cryptography encryption, since the beginning of the connection. And so I just choose StartTLS. Second point, I need to understand how the certificate is going to be validated. We just imported the certificate authority public key. I should choose in this step to use the system authorization, the system configuration, or I can inform specifically an URL where the script can download the public key for the ovirt-engine. In this case, I'm using the URL. I'm pointing to Active Directory where the certificate authority public key is available. So the first point. The next point, the setup script command. The setup script tries to be solved for the underline LDAP, underline TCP, example.com DNS service record. It locates that URL correctly, and it tries to execute the StartTLS connection. Connection succeed, it goes ahead. After successful connection, you will need to inform how to connect. Which user the ovirt-engine is going to test all the connections. I can use that distinguished name, or I can use that user principal name. In this example, I'm using the user principal name for the connection. I need to pass the password for this, and these are going to be stored in the configuration. At the bottom of the line, at the bottom of the screen, you can see you need to provide a profile name. As my Active Directory has a domain example.com, I'm choosing the same example.com profile name for this configuration. It makes it easier for you to understand which user is coming from which domain server. Okay, this point, the system stored that information, but after storing that information, the script needs to run an LDAP lookup at the server and needs to authenticate one user to confirm it can use that configuration for the system. In the previous screen, the previous slide, we said when you run that any LDAP, when the ovirt-engine run any LDAP connection to the Active Directory, use this UPN. This UPN, user principal name or distinguished name, is going to be used just to confirm the user available. And this needs to have one user to start testing. In this case, I'm using the same user. So it will run the first connection, see if this account is available, and then we'll perform a bind using this second user and password for the authentication. It will execute the login sequence and run some tests on it. When it successfully terminates and successfully, we can confirm to use that information. Just type done, and it will store all the configuration on your system. That configuration is stored under a summary section, so it says where it's saving all the configurations and where you can find the log for this transaction. For this configuration to take effect, just restart the ovirt-engine services, and you can start performing a connection to the ovirt-engine dashboard. In this case, it can be the administration portal, it can be the user portal. And if you go to the ovirt-engine dashboard, if you go to the administration portal or the user portal, the starting point, you will need to select the specific profile where you're going to authenticate. In the default, you have username, password, RIP, and the profile comes with the internal profile. It's where the admin user was created, and you can create another account for it. But we're going to test an external user. It comes from an external authentication mechanism. In this case, Active Directory. I enter with my username, Marcus, my password, and selected the user profile. Point. The ovirt-engine dashboard, the administration portal, will authenticate me, but I will not have authorization to access the dashboard at this time. What's needed to be done? What do you need to do? You need to add a profile for that user. And no matter how many external profiles you have, no external user will have access to the administration portal or to the user VM portal without having a role associated to it. In this case, I need a current user with admin access, and I need to go to the left menu at administration, configure, and then on the next stream, I need to select system permissions. At system permissions, click in the add button. It will bring me this screen. In this screen, I just select in the search for the profile. I just set it up, and the namespace it's going to work on. I can just put a star on the name, or I can put directly a username for this, and select and click go. Click and go, it will list all the users that match the search criteria you just entered. And at the bottom, at the left bottom, you're going to select user role. In general, it can be a VM user, it can be a super user, or you can provide a granularity access roles like data center user, data center administrator, disk administrator, storage administrator, cluster administrator, and many other combinations. One single user may have different roles associated to him. Okay, just select it and click OK. Your users are going to have access to the administration portal in this case, and if it's going to be a VM user, the user will can connect to the VM portal, to the user portal of the ovirt-engine. Okay, I just did all the configuration. I set up the external mechanism. I was able to associate roles to different users from the Active Directory. But in any case, I may have an issue. My previous configuration is not working. I want to start over. I just want to remove my previous configuration and start over. What do I need to do? At the configuration summary, you have 4 files identified as the fully configuration. What you need to do, just remove those files and start the ovirt-engine service. Remove those files. If you start the ovirt-engine services, it will come back to the previous state of the system. And you can run the setup script again and select the different options, change the connection type. And in this first example, I used StartTLS. I can change from StartTLS to LDAPS and make different use, change the user to bind, and then change the user to test authentication. You can run many different configurations you want to. Okay. And one point. Troubleshooting the LDAP connection. If you have any issue with the external authentication mechanism, many times the problems can be identified using the LDAP connection. This first example, I'm running an ldapsearch, an authenticated ldapsearch. This example is using simple connections, clear text. So encryption is not a problem here. No certificate authority, no public key to test, and nothing to import. I'm just running an ldapsearch command to understand if it is working fine or not. In this example, I have an extremely extremely screaming error message, invalid credentials. And I think, whoa, man, I typed my password wrong. And I try to run it again, or I change the ldapsearch command to pass the password on the command line. Bad idea, but yes, I can test this way. You can do many things. You can change many options in this item, this command line, to test your connection. And it keeps falling with invalid credentials. When you troubleshoot on a LDAP connection with an Active Directory server, your real error message comes from the data field. At the last line, you can see data 533. What does it mean? This is the point. In this specific case, that user account, in my example, Oracle Service LDM account disabled. I need to enable this account to proceed with that and with that connection. I just picked up the most common errors from the list. This list is huge. It has many other error codes, but the most common. You just pass a user that does not exist. I did a typo or anything. Invalid credentials. This is the real invalid credentials error code 52E. Not permitted to log on at this time, so you have restrictions applied to that user. So you may inspect anything. This is the real problem when connecting to an LDAP server, to an Active Directory LDAP server. These errors will bring to you many descriptions, many things where you can find what's really happening instead of just invalid credentials. The only error with invalid credentials is the 52E. All the other errors that comes in the data field have a different error on the system. Okay, and at last but not least, the logs. Which logs do I can look for to understand what's happening and what path, any additional information I can type? Only the engine.log file has information about this kind of connection. The authentication authorization extensions of the ovirt-engine sends only its outputs, message, standard message, error message to engine.log file. That's the only point you need to see. Well, I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'm available if you have any question. Thank you.